Hello and welcome everyone to today's session of Entre Colegas, dialogues between behavioral health providers of Latinx. We are very delighted and excited as well that are to be joined today by Dr. Rocio Chan for these conversations on trauma among Latina communities. If this will be hope we look for this conversation to be among us as colleagues and with our guest speaker Dr. Rocio Chang to discuss aspects that influence behavioral health among Hispanic and Latina individuals and also to develop culturally responsive approaches to guide and care. So welcome everyone again as everyone keeps joining in. If we can move on to the next slide.
Oops, that's me.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. So I would like to let everyone know that we offer simultaneous translation to Spanish. We are joined by our interpreters, our team of interpreters. So to access that para traducción simultánea en español, click the interpretation tab and then click Spanish. Así que puede presionar, si es hispanohablante, la pestaña de interpretación y luego presionar en español para escuchar la discusión y la conversación que tendremos hoy en español. And during today's webinar, the event is being recorded. Please make sure your computer speakers are turned on and up to hear today's presentation. And as Dr. Rocio Chang delivers part of the presentation, please make sure that your microphone is muted during that time. If you are having any technical issues, please send a message to the Hispanic and Latina Behavioral Health COE on the chat box and to see how we can assist. And if you have questions for Dr. Chang or ourselves, later on there will be a moment where we indicate to address those questions. You can address those questions through the Q&A tab, or then we'll have a moment to open the cameras and open the mics to address those questions. And once we complete the webinar, please make sure to complete today's evaluation. A link to that evaluation will be shared through the chat. And you can also scan a QR code that we'll share at the end of the presentation to complete it. That's really important for us, and we really hope that you have the chance to complete that evaluation, and because it gives us an idea of not only how your thoughts and ideas about the presentation today and your feedback, but also what other types of trainings and training and technical assistance and presentation events you would like to see in the future related to behavioral health for Hispanic and Latina communities. And you should be receiving a certificate of attendance by email approximately 2 weeks from today. And please remember to check your junk folder in case it ends up there. So about the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, our mission is to advance and support the sustainability of behavioral health equity by promoting community-driven, culturally grounded, person-centered prevention, intervention, multiple pathways of recovery, and recovery supports for diverse Hispanic and Latina communities. And the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence recognizes the complexities associated with gender and ethnic identification, as well as the right of individuals to self-identify. The center uses the term Latine with the intention of both facilitating a fluent reading and pronunciation and supporting an inclusive and respectful language. Latine is a gender-neutral form of the word Latino that uses the letter E at the end, an idea native to the Spanish language. So I'd like to formally welcome today's speaker, Dr. Rocio Chang. Dr. Rocio Chang is an assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine and a faculty affiliate at the UConn Health Disparities Institute at the University of Connecticut Latin Studies. She is the co-director of the Center for Trauma and Recovery and Juvenile Justice and the Center for Treatment Development and Trauma Disorders. Rocio has key clinical and educational roles at UConn Health, including providing care to medical dental graduate students, patients, and families, and supervising and teaching students, residents, and fellows. Her roles are focused on enhancing diversity and equity practices. As a result, she's the Latino Medical Student Association co-chair, the Anti-Racist Trauma-Informed System Transformation or ARTIST founder, and a School of Medicine Diversity Counseling member. At the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, she is the co-chair of the Latino Children and Family Collaborative Group, a former co-chair of the Parenting with Youth and Families Collaborative Group. Um, uh, and as well, Rocio has experience providing clinical care to children, adolescents, and families dealing with emotional dysregulation. Being fully bilingual and bicultural, she has spent most of her career implementing culturally appropriate services for diverse communities, developing unique skills for building relationships across cultures, and establishing a vast network of individuals in various communities. So we are delighted to have her with us today here, and I will hand it off to Dr. Shang. Thank you, Dr. Shang.
Many thanks, Eric. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you. Welcome. This is an important topic, and I think that, I'm very happy that we are starting to talk entre colegas about Latinos and trauma, because this is a very relevant topic that unfortunately touches more lives than what we would like to admit. And I'd like to start by doing a mindfulness exercise. And this mindfulness exercise is a little bit different than the one that we are used to. This is actually a mindfulness exercise that a colleague, another Latino colleague, invited me to do. And it's from Dr. Yellowbird, who talks about decolonizing mindfulness. And I think it's very appropriate to talk about decolonization, because what we are trying to do also with these conversations is to explore ways where we as Latinos, we as providers of Latino communities, can really start thinking more carefully about what are the types of treatments that we provide to these communities and how we can make sure that they are decolonizing in nature, so we don't portray the same, we don't portray biases as much as possible, and we provide services that are really important and much needed for the Latino communities as well as other BIPOC communities. So I will invite you, to think comfortably, to sit comfortably. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we mean when we say mindful decolonization. So according to Dr. Yellowbird, a way to begin engaging in mindful decolonization, we can do some practices that can be used for self-care, promote well-being, and inspire optimism for all of us, involving the struggle for individual, community, and societal compassion, justice, and healing. It's important to remember to bring a sense of curiosity, openness, and hopefulness as we do these practices. And to begin with this mindfulness practice, it is important to also remember that attitude is everything. The Buddha once said, "What you think, you become." Therefore, it is important to understand that in this practice, you are putting yourself in a frame of mind to open up and invite yourself to see, analyze, and confront colonization through your clinical work practice and our personal experiences. In any thoughts, emotions, or images, or if any thoughts, emotions, or images arise during this meditation that are overwhelming, You can choose to stand and feel the sensations of your feet on the floor. All right? So please find, as I said before, a comfortable sitting position. Relax your body. Sit up straight. Lay your hands on your lap. Gently lower your gaze or close your eyes, and silently and mindfully repeat to yourself 3 or 4 times. I am meditating in order to decolonize all oppressive systems to end the suffering of all sentient beings. We're going to repeat this again. And let's focus on our breathing, all right? I am meditating in order to decolonize all oppressive systems to end the suffering of all sentient beings. And we're going to breathe in and out again, and we're going to repeat it one more time. I am meditating in order to decolonize all oppressive systems to end the suffering of all sentient beings. And as we breathe in and out, let's continue focusing on our breath and relax any tension we have in our bodies. And as you breathe in and out, spend several minutes focusing on your breath and content in your mind and any feelings or emotions that are arising. Allow them to pass and continue watching your in-breath as it enters your nostrils and circulates throughout your body and leaves on the out breath. All right, so let's do it 3 more times. In and out, in and out, in and out. And now we're going to repeat. I am meditating in order to increase my positive energy, to take care of myself in order to do this work. And let's focus on our breathing, and let's do it one more time. I am meditating in order to increase my positive energy, to take care of myself in order to do this work. And one more time, we're focusing on our breathing in and out, and we're going to repeat it one last time. I am meditating in order to increase my positive energy, to take care of myself in order to do this work. And as we focus back in our breathing, we take a few deep breaths and try and let your mind rest on the sensation of breathing in and out. And now we're going to repeat this phrase 2 times. May I thrive with ease in the struggle for change. One more time. May I thrive with ease in the struggle for change. And we're going to breathe in and out. And this is our last phrase for this mindful decolonization. May I embody courage and action in the face of fear. May I embody courage and action in the face of fear. And as we breathe in and out, we're going to, if you close your eyes, you can open it now, and you can give a little bit of a big stretch. And now you can be back with all of us, and I welcome you again. So this is a practice that I wanted to open up our conversations entre colegas, because I think that is super important for us to start thinking about more conscious activities that we can all do in order to keep on doing the work that is meaningful and the work that it has a purpose for us, right? So I know that you all have signed in here for because you wanted to get something. And I know that Eric has come out with a very nice, only a few questions that we would like to ask during the presentation to see, how we can fit the needs that you have. But please feel free to write down in the chat or ask questions. Or I think that we are a relatively small group where we can actually start a conversation. I know that we are all adult learners and that you do have a lot of great experiences, and the group will benefit from what also you can share with us. So please feel free to participate at any time. So, and the idea that I have for this presentation is that we want to give opportunities more to talk and share experiences. So I have some slides that I have taken from a curriculum that can be found for free at the National Child Stress Traumatic Network, the NCTSN. And I know that Eric will be distributing this at the end of the presentation. And this curriculum is called Think Trauma. And it's actually a train of trainers curriculum that I really love to facilitate and train because it has great information, but it also makes us think about how we can really include more decolonization ideas into the work that we do. So I'm going to go over the main facts about trauma, and I'm going to sort of keep on figuring out how we can include more of what we know into our Latino communities. And for the people who are Latinos, I think that we are part of the community, so we can also talk from our, professional experiences, but also from our own life experiences, right? So trauma and factors that influence its impact, they are diverse, but we're going to talk a little bit about, SAMHSA talks about the 3 E's of trauma exposure. So, it depends on the type of events that we go through, the type of experiences, and the types of effects that happen as a result of trauma. Now, when we refer to trauma, we refer to something that it is an event that a person experiences as extremely harmful or life-threatening and potentially has short or long-term harmful effects on the person. And now we know that, as providers and as, different professions who are day in and day out exposed to trauma for work, that can also be, can place you in a more vulnerable state for you to experience trauma symptoms, even though you haven't really experienced trauma directly. And the same thing happens for our community members who are exposed to, for instance, community violence day in and day out. Even if it is not directly towards them, they might also experience trauma symptoms as a result of being exposed to it, right? So that's something that is important also to have that as a reference and as a framework. Now, trauma and the factors that influence its impact has directly connections with the age of the youth, right? The age of a child, the age of an individual, if we're talking to adults. So the earlier that we experience trauma in our lives, the better chances that we will have more challenges throughout our life, right? And this oftentimes means that, if a human has experienced trauma and nothing has done about it, the chances are that throughout the length of this person's life, they are going to experience many different challenges. And the earlier the trauma, the more challenges that can be experienced. Now, also, what the impact that trauma has depends also in the trauma history. So, and I would say that the more different types of trauma that a person experiences, the more chances that there will be having experiencing more challenges and difficulties. And obviously, we need to know the difference between being a direct victim or witnessing. But now we know that if even witnessing many times, if it is very often, if it is very frequent, if it has great intensity, it can also impact the life of an individual. And, oftentimes we also understand that the trauma that has the most impact is the trauma that is perpetrated by the people who are supposed to take care of us, our caretakers, right? And we also know that there are, as a result of trauma, there are different experiences that are secondary adversities that can also repeat or open up for other types of trauma that individual might experience, right? So, for instance, an example that is oftentimes used is, when a child is being removed from his household due to abuse. This child already experienced the abuse from the people who were supposed to care for them, their caretakers, oftentimes their parents. But then, the secondary adversities that this child might experience, depending on their age, is that that loss of sense of community, the loss of sense of going to school and seeing his peers or her peers, all of the known sort of environment, it also gets lost, and they are relocated many times, oftentimes to places that they are super new and that they have to readjust, right? So that also is taken as a secondary adversity. So please stop me at any time if you do have any questions or anything like that. So, from what we have right here, if we want to apply to working with Latino communities, there is amazing potential here just to keep on talking, right? Whether or not we know that Latinos, we are a very diverse group, right? And, we can talk about immigrants who come from many different places versus Puerto Ricans who are American citizens. And, we know that people who are not from Puerto Rico are immigrants, the ones that who come. And people who are from Puerto Rico, they might migrate from the island to the mainstream. So that's a different sort of different sort of situation. And but at the same time, some of the experiences might be similar, right? In terms of migrating, oftentimes when humans, when individuals migrate, depending on the developmental stage, it might be a very exhilarating experience, but also it's an experience full of losses, right? You're leaving the known to move to something super unknown. And this opens up opportunities for growth, but also opportunities maybe for being more vulnerable and experiencing trauma. And oftentimes, in terms of immigration, what we see now more and more is that people are immigrating to this country because they are really trying to escape for something, right? There is a group of people who already are having a hard time in their own places. And, they see coming to the US as their only way out. And if that's the case, many times, we know that we are working with individuals who are experiencing trauma before, during, and after immigrating to this country. And, we can go on and out, and in terms of, if there are like families who are immigrating, there are different members of the family and at different ages and different developmental stages, and it's gonna impact this differently, depending on all the different factors. And the same thing if we're talking to our Puerto Rican community, oftentimes what we understand is that the migration that happens sometimes. Many scholars talk about the circular migration. When that happens, is that many times there are many different stressors that Puerto Rican families might be experiencing, for instance, in the island, and they decide to come to the mainstream, right? And with the hope that things will get better, right? And then oftentimes might not work the way that they expected it. And then after being here for some time, they go back to the island. And that migration, circular migration, might be full of experiences for further growth, but also might create many different losses and many different experiences that can be considered traumatic. So, so this is important to realize that when we talk about Latinos, we can really figure things out as we are just going through general frameworks about trauma and its impact and some of the facts. So how are we doing so far? This is making sense. Is this something that you would like that you sign in for? Just let me know. If there's anything else that you would like me to cover, I'll be more than happy to try. So when we talk about trauma, we talk about, the sense of protection and injury, right? So, oftentimes, not oftentimes, we all need to feel protected, especially when we're very young, right? We depend on caretakers, we depend on people for us to manage to live. And many times what we understand is that the stage of development and life experiences shape the way youth perceive protection and safety, right? For a child who lives in a nurturing environment, protection and safety might be experienced from a child who had to be removed from his household due to abuse. Each traumatic experience can cause invisible wounds that can change how a child develops, right? And those invisible wounds are the key, because, when we talk about trauma, it's something that we cannot really see. The wounds cannot be seen, but we can also observe certain behaviors, different challenges, and, obviously, we are all in this clinical work, and we understand that there are many things that we need to ask in order to understand why a person is actually, why she or he is coming to see us. So youth recover from these wounds through relationships they build with healthy adults. And that's actually the hope. And that's, I think, the reason why we are all here, because we understand that even though trauma has a significant impact in a person's life, and the longer that we live, the better chances that we have that we all will experience what trauma is. Unfortunately, many times that's the case. And that we know that if we have a good sense of community, healthy relationships, there is hope that we can not only survive that terrible experience, but we can also thrive from it. Okay. So here we are. So this is what SAMHSA actually provides very, very detailed sort of trainings about the principles for a trauma-informed system. And when I talk about trauma-informed system, oftentimes, before I used to think organizations, big organizations, places like that. But I think that we can also think about the macro and the micro levels, right? Because even when we are working with families or in our own families, these principles, some of them, if not all of them, can be also applicable. So it doesn't really matter where you go. I think that these principles can really help us to provide a good framework and to figure out what are the elements that we need, what are the principles that we need in order to bring more prevention or also to help each other to overcome symptoms as a result of trauma. So the first big block here that you see at the beginning is safety, right? We all need to feel safe. And the thing is that even when, I mean, we need to feel safe, I think, from the day that we are born. And this is important, and it could apply to whatever system that we are working on or we are in. Safety is the key. And safety is something that, our whole organism perceives, right? So it's not really a matter of somebody that could tell us whether or not we can feel safe. We are wired to perceive whether or not we are in a safe environment or in a safe system. And that's the key. That's the key for us to feel that we can be ourselves, that we can trust people, that we can be genuine, that we can, or we need to put our defenses up, or we need to run, or we need to escape or fight, anything else that we have to do in order to survive, right? So then the other principle is trust, right? So think about yourself, right? When you are in relationships or places, contexts where you feel that you can trust the other, where you can trust the institution that you're working with, or the institution that you're being part of, you are actually in a different sort of frame of mind than when you cannot really count with that trust, right? And the same thing with empowerment. Empowerment is something that makes us feel good, make us feel competent, make us feel that we are contributing to something, that, that sense of belonging, that sense that, there is a reason why you are there. So this is something that, even little kids need to and crave to get. And it's a good principle to keep in mind when we are working, not only with Latino communities, but any community, right? And then, we are Latinos, so we think collectively. And so collaboration is something that is sort of, is a given for us, right? So, you are thinking about the group. You're thinking about how everybody could benefit. And that's something that we do very well. And, along the same lines, peer support and trauma competence makes sense, right? Because we like to connect with others. We like to share resources. We like to talk. We like to tell stories, and obviously we're talking about trauma, and, knowing more about how trauma impacts the lives of individuals and might have the potential thing that has impacted our own. I think that could really help us to bring this principle up front. And, peer support is another way of connecting with individuals, and healthy relations are really therapeutic and healing. And the last one, the other principle, is that we need to figure out how our trauma-informed systems take into consideration the cultural history of the communities or individuals that we work with, the historical history, their linguistic needs, and we need to be more understanding and more educated on gender responsiveness. This is something that I think that as Latinos, we are still have to do a lot of work, not only Latino communities, but many communities. But I think that, we have, our colonizing mind has taken us to ways where these conversations are still not so natural going, and we need to push ourselves and stretch more in order to get it right. So when we talk about complex trauma, right, we're talking about the type of trauma exposure and the developmental impact. And now we are going back to our early beginnings. And when little kids start experiencing chronic and/or multiple traumas, you bet that little kids are going to have a significant impact. And not only is going to be noticed at their early age, but it can carry on for many, many years if they are not being helped. So interpersonal trauma often caused by a caregiver or other trusted adult, that's when we consider complex trauma, right? This is something that we are not expected to happen, but unfortunately it does. So, even though we are wired to survive, and oftentimes many people do, it still is a great injury and wound when a caretaker is the one that is the perpetrator. And trauma typically begins at a very, very young age. So when we talk about complex trauma, these are the facts. Okay. And now, here are the impacts of a complex trauma. So we know that then, if we cannot trust, if we cannot feel safe, we understand that there is plenty of research that shows that our attachment is going to be impacted, right? So attachment, the way that we make connections, is going to be impacted, because if we very early in our lives cannot trust the main people, the key people in our lives, it's going to be super hard to trust others, and it's also hard to trust ourselves. So, so attachment and the types of relationships that we can form and how we can bond are impacted. Then we also have impacts in our biological and physical growth and health. We also might experience significant challenges in our cognitions, and we understand now that there are different parts of our brain that are being impacted when we experience complex trauma. One of them is the amygdala. It's in our midbrain. It serves as an alarm center. When the alarm center becomes super sensitive because of such an early age, we had to learn how to survive. In our brain, it goes into a survival mode and nothing else. Then many brains are actually very adapted to only be responding to crisis. And that this alarm center starts sort of dominating the whole brain and hijacking the whole brain of very early, right? In a very early development. So other parts of the brain that can help us to learn, can help us to keep on growing, in a way of that our cognitions and other different aspects of function need to make other connections. Unfortunately, if we have an amygdala that is super active, those other parts of the brains are not going to be able to do what is expected in the development where they are at. So then this creates more challenges, because then people cannot, little kids have a lot of challenges regulating emotions if they don't have any other access to any other parts of their brains, or if they have minimum access, right? And then, there are other challenges, because they cannot regulate their emotions, they cannot regulate their behaviors, and the way that they see themselves and they see the world is very unsafe. And they are not able to trust anybody. And, we understand that oftentimes healing begins with healthy connections and relationships. And many times these kids are really rejected, or they are abandoned, or they are like, nobody wants to be around them because of their difficulties that they present regulating emotions and regulating behaviors. And so then they feel more isolated, and there is more potential for further trauma as a result of not being able to connect in healthy ways. So this becomes like a very vicious cycle. And here we are, and I know that we get this, that it is super important to be the best advocates for these kids and find different ways where they can slow down that alarm center, slow down that amygdala, so they can live better lives and they can form the connections that they desperately need in order to continue doing their own healing. So the impact of multiple traumas, we understand that it might be complex trauma with the facts that I gave you, but also, people experience some sort of victimization, right? So complex trauma involves being victimized and often exposed to multiple types of trauma. And that's the devastating piece, right? That oftentimes, especially if we're talking with little kids or if we're treating little kids, oftentimes it seems that they don't have a break. And not having a break means that their brain is sort of mainly in survival mode, not being able to do anything else than just surviving, many different types of trauma. And obviously, other aspects of their lives are going to be very much impacted. And the exposure to violence and victimizations can include experiences outside the home in settings such as the community or school. Okay, so that's also important to realize, and oftentimes, unfortunately, with some of the kids who we work with, it seems that different contexts present different traumas. So there are more opportunities for further damage and further wounds than for healing. And this is something that, we need to keep this in mind, because what we want is we want to create, or we want to expose kids and also adults. We all need it. Communities that care, communities that can provide that sense of safety, communities where they can build trust and empowerment and prevent more secondary adversities, right? And create more opportunities for peer support, and create more opportunities to understand how trauma impacts the lives of any individual, not only a few. The more that I do this work, I'm super convinced that, this impacts everyone. And many times it's actually the way that we overcome this is depending on what resources we have, and depending on who is part of our community, and when there are other different factors, but it is important to realize that. And so let's see. So when we talk about the impact of multiple traumas, these are some examples. Kids being bullied at the school, living in a home with a parent who uses substances, exposure to community violence, sexual victimization by a stranger or acquaintance outside of home, exposure to domestic violence. And the main message here with all of these different types of trauma is that nowhere is safe or feels safe. You cannot trust people. You feel sometimes that you're a failure, so there is no way of empowering that, right? And as a result of not trusting people, you cannot form healthy relationships. And then we already talked about how this goes on and on. And, in any of these type of experiences, what we also understand is that it's not just one time that happens this, it's multiple times, right? Sometimes some kids are being exposed to domestic violence for years, right? Or living in a home with a parent who uses substances. That parent is not only going to use it one day. That parent has also some issues that need to be addressed. And, sometimes the length of time can be also something that we need to notice, and can impact the life of not only the child, but the whole family. So I know that most of you, if not all of you, have heard about the adverse childhood experiences. And, the adverse childhood experiences, I think that was one of the studies that was a revolutionary study where, there was a psychiatrist and an epidemiologist from CDC, a psychiatrist from Kaiser Permanente, who decided after some of their experiences after some of their experiences working with individuals who present, adults who present significant challenges in their lives, and there were physical health challenges in their life. They decided to, Dr. Fellini from Kaiser Permanente decided to run a weight loss clinic in California. Most of the people were middle class, most of the people were white, they were educated, but they were really having problems managing their weight to the point that this was really impacting their overall health. And these were people who were considered morbidly obese. And so, he started running the clinic, things are doing very well. And then all of a sudden, he notices that, the people who were losing weight, they were not coming back to the clinic. So he was like, wow, either I am super successful in this, or there is something else that I'm not seeing. And then after a few months, the same people who left were going back to the clinic, but this time they were going back with more weight than what they started the study with, right? The weight loss clinic. So then, as a good psychiatrist, he started asking psychosocial questions. And one of the first one that impacted him the most was when he asked a woman, a middle-aged woman, how old was she when she started becoming sexually active? And she told him 5 years old. So you knew that there was something there, right? This woman was sexually abused as a child. And then he thought about coming out with 10 questions about childhood experiences. So all the frame of the questions were before the age of 18. Did you experience, physical abuse, sexual abuse? One of your parents used some substances? Did one of your parents go to jail? There were other questions that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. But the good thing that I want you to think about is that these were yes or no answers. So they were just yes, no, but they were not testing or examining the intensity, the frequency of the questions that they were asking. And there were 10. So it was about physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse before the age of 18, neglect, it had physical and also emotional, and then questions about household dysfunction. So, one parent or caregiver had a mental illness, one parent or caregiver went to jail or prison, was your mother at that time. It was in the late 80s, early 90s. So domestic violence, I think that we still consider that it happens more to women than men, but this is also changing. So, was your mother treated violently? Was one of your parents or caregiver using substances? Or were your parents divorced before the age of 18? Okay, so these were the 10 questions. And this is what we know. Obviously, I told you that there were over 17,000 people who were surveyed on this. So this was really a big study. And the thing is that the questions were limited and they didn't really include the Latino realities, right? If we are talking about Entre Colegas, we can come out with questions about what happens to Latinos that were not included here. And they are adverse childhood experiences too. So think about which ones you would like to ask. Here are a few. So there were some questions that were not included. Questions that were not included were about bullying, were about teen dating violence, were about peer-to-peer violence, were about witnessing violence in community or school, were about homelessness, were about death of a parent. There were other ones that you can you can write down in the chat, right? We talk about immigration and migration and under what circumstances, families move, right? We can also talk about the separation at the border. We can also talk about, discrimination. We can talk about feeling like a second citizen, right? And being mistreated for that. So there are many different things that were not included that we can really think about how Latino communities experience adverse childhood events differently. And that we also need to consider how that impacts the lives of the people who we served and how that it can also impact our own lives, right? All right. So, but the results were truly impressive, right? I mean, they were like impressive, but they were really very sad to know that even for the people who came from middle class and who were relatively good educated and who mostly were white, right? They experienced significant adverse childhood events before their age of 18. And as a result, they were actually experiencing significant physical challenges and significant health challenges as a result of this, right? So there was a correlation. So there are no direct results, but it was really interesting that the people who endorse more adverse childhood experiences were the people who were really having a lot of significant health issues during their middle age. So, you know, the percentage of people who endorse physical abuse, there was 11%, 28 endorse physical abuse, sexual abuse was 21, emotional neglect 15, physical neglect 10, substance abuse of a parent 27, parental abandonment 23, mental illness 17, battered mother 13%, and the criminal behavior of a parent going to jail or prison 6%. So significant results here, significant percentages. And then what they also started analyzing more and more information, and what they concluded was that 4 or more adverse childhood experiences impacted the development, the neurodevelopment of the individual. So they experienced disrupted neurodevelopment. They also, it actually impacted their social, emotional, and cognitive development. It also sort of led individuals to adopt more health risk behaviors that created more disease, more disability, and more social problems in these individuals. And as a result, they ended up dying earlier, 20 years earlier than when compared with their peers. So significant results and with significant consequences. So now we were not represented in the first ACE study, right? And still Latinos are not well represented in any study, I would say. So we need to do more for that. But you know, this is a most recent study that only surveyed less than 2,000 people, not 17, like not more than 17,000, like the first study. But this one, they were really trying to study more the urban communities. So we have 41% white people, 42 Black, 4% Latinos, 4% Asian, biracial were 4%, and other 2. And they were like, women were more representative than men, so 42% men and 58% women. And this is what we found out. When we compare the ACE study, the original one, with the urban study, we see that unfortunately, more adverse experiences, the percentages are higher for the urban study than from the original one. So, you know, in the original one, 28% of people endorse physical abuse. In the urban setting one in Philadelphia, there was 35. So there was like 7% higher, right? Emotional abuse for the original study, there was almost 11%, but for the urban setting study, it was 33%, a lot more. And the same thing for mental illness, the same thing for substance abuse of a parent, and similar thing for incarceration. So this make us conclude that, communities of color, and I don't really like that term that much, but we have more potential to experience more adverse childhood experiences. Given that, I think that the systems are not really doing a good job protecting us, right? So here it is. So, people now are noticing more and more, and this is one part of decolonization, decolonizing what we are being educated in and how we are asking questions and what we do with how we study this. But, when we think about trauma and adverse childhood experiences, we can also think about public safety and health challenges and how these are being, what are the factors and what are the roles that system play on what we experience. So if you look at the down of the slide here, you see there is adverse community environments. And these are some things that we need to be very mindful about, considering whenever we are working with Latino communities or other communities who are not treated nicely. So adverse community environments, are samples of these are poverty, right? And for Latinos, we are actually a population that we do have a high rate of poverty, no matter where you go in the U.S. The experience of discrimination and how we are discriminated, community disruption, lack of opportunity for economic mobility and for social capital, poor housing quality and affordability, and the experience of violence. All of these are adverse community environments. Oftentimes we don't talk about it, but they are at the root for what then we experience of adverse childhood experiences, and this is something that if we keep on considering more and more, the types of treatment that we need to provide need to go to the root. And so advocacy is important, trying to figure out how we can make sure that the systems that are actually highly responsible for these root and community environments are systems that are doing a lot to eliminate these facts. All right, so we can also talk about historical trauma. And when we talk about historical trauma, we refer to cumulative emotional and psychological wounding as a result of group traumatic experiences, right? And we Latinos have our own share of historical trauma. A history of violence, prejudice toward a community can lead to distrust of institutions intended to help youth or adults or kids. And the impact of trauma across generations can influence parents and children expectations about safety and determine important behaviors for protection, such as distrust in institutions. So now, I am from Latin America. I am from South America. I'm originally from Peru. And we were colonized, right? We were colonized by the Spanish people. And they did a lot of damage, more than 500 years ago, I think. Yes. So, and no matter where you go in Peru, and especially when you go to tourist attractions, and if you go to museums and things like that, you can see the devastation that happened, right? And you could also see how, with a colonizing mentality, we begin discriminating among each other. So, we do have this sort of misconception or biases towards our own people. So if you look whiter, if you have light skin, or if you have light color of your eyes, you are more like the colonizing looking person. Chances are that you are better seen in Peru. If you are of darker skin, if you look more like an Indian person, chances are that you are going to be more discriminated. It still is with us. More than 500 years, and of the devastation, and still we cannot celebrate ourselves the way that we should. And obviously, there are many, many more things, but I think that in each community, we need to figure out what we need to do in order to continue healing and in order to continue noticing how many, many sort of beliefs are ingrained in us without even us realizing. And we start acting out without even being super conscious about it. And then, the whole idea about hurt people, we begin portraying the same abuse towards our own people. All right. So I have talked a lot, and I just want to see if we can have some conversation. But before I do that, I just also want to tell you about a wonderful resort. And I'm actually very aware that it might sound biased because I'm the co-director of this center, and it's called the Center for Treatment of Developmental Trauma Disorder. And what we are doing is we are filming videos, and the videos that we're filming are videos that can sort of teach us how we can do therapy about complex trauma, developmental trauma, and how we face many times in therapy critical moments and what we need to do about it. And there are many different psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, clinicians overall, who come to Connecticut, where I work, University of Connecticut, and they film these videos with us. We actually work with kids who are from a theater program. They know how to do improvised theater, and it's truly amazing how we can work with them, and we learn so much from them. And I think that they also learn so much from us. So I want to share with you this because I think that many times also doing the work with a multidisciplinary framework really helps. So we also have our amazing film crew that have been working with us for the past 7 years. And I swear that we feel like family. Every year we meet for a whole week and we do intensive work, but we also do rehearsals and we do different sort of gatherings and meetings to do the work. And it's not only professional work, but it's also personal work, I believe, because we all come out with more perspectives that we can apply in our own lives, but also in our professional lives. So here it is. Here are my two wonderful colleagues, Michael Gomez and Dr. Miller from Boston University. And here we have, the print is super, super small. And I'm so sorry for that. But you will get, you have here our website, and you do have from the website from the National Child Stress Trauma Network. That is where we also house over 40 webinars. You can have access for free after you see the therapeutic session that sort of lasts for 10 or 15 minutes. Then there are like a group of commentators who talk about it, and it's almost like having a case consultation with you. So there is a lot of wonderful opportunities for us to keep on growing together and keep on sharing the resources and keep on, learning together about how we need to do the work. And, there is, as you know, there is not one way that will fit all, but there are many different ways that you can see and you can find your own style and you can figure some things that can be helpful too. There are from time to time, we do have, cases that are from Latino families, and we try to be very careful about doing this type of therapy because we definitely do not want to colonize more, and we want to make sure that the services that we deliver, even in the training that we do, are from a decolonized mindful place. So let me see if I can share with you one. Let's see. Oh, this is gonna ask me for signing in. So, you need to sign in order to have access to this. And then you could just do, have access for free at any time that you want to. Now, somebody's gonna help me to figure out how I could share the value because that sometimes is the thing that, can you hear it? Anybody can hear it or no?
No, Dr. Chang, I think there I don't think there's a way right now maybe to embed it there. Maybe if we can share the video with them for them to open them up.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm just gonna show you.
Some space.
There we can hear there we can hear a little bit better, yes.
You can hear it a little bit better. So this is during the pandemic. So here you go.
She's still kind of a bitch.
So there is this is a
Judges me, but at the same time.
this is a webinar of a young mom, and the therapist was really trying to figure out, how she can really help this young man understand her toddler's behavior, not as a result of taking it personal. This toddler went through her own trauma and mom went through her own trauma. So, trying to listen to mom and trying to sort of be supportive, but at the same time, trying to make sure that mom could parent her toddler the way that her toddler needs to be parent, right? So this is one session that I can show you a little bit more but you can also go on and look at it. But what I want to walk you through is, after the session, there is a period that, there is there is a lot happening there. And then you can see how, there are reflections from the therapies that are being posted here. There are also reflections from the commentators. And there is a lot of good conversation that happens as a result of it. And, with a lot of potential learning that goes on and on for an hour and 30 minutes. But if you do not have the time for an hour and 30 minutes, you can just do what works best for you. And so that's what I have for you now. I'm wondering if you have any questions, if we can just open it up. Eric, I will follow you.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Chan. In the spirit of having a dialogue about part of the wonderful and specific content and information and knowledge that Dr. Chang brought, specifically both around trauma exposure, navigating the discussions of trauma with Hispanic and Latina individuals. We would like to open it up to anyone who has any questions for Dr. Chan, and maybe we can begin a conversation from there. And feel free to, if you wish to unmute yourself or also use your camera, you're welcome to do so at this time.
And maybe we can actually start by the questions that you have posted in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to start posting in the chat some questions that maybe could help us guide the conversation. I'm actually going to start with the fourth one because I think we're at that point that we might like to address that. So, and I'm going to post it here in the chat, and it reads as follows. So let me make sure everyone has that. What have you found most challenging when working with Latinx survivors of trauma? So anyone in our audience who has questions around that, I for myself, and maybe I'll start. My background is in clinical psychology, so I've worked before with Hispanic and Latina immigrants, specifically in New York, from different backgrounds, and sometimes when I think about trauma, and I think Vanderkolk mentioned this once, that it's not only looking to what happened to you, but who was there, right? And that system, that social system, those psychosocial questions that sometimes are important to address. And what do you do when the person who's with this lived experience around trauma brings that to you as a provider and says nobody was there for me? What are those steps? How can we visualize care within that context that might come up in a session?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So, oftentimes, I mean, there are many good treatments, but before we engage into treating, many times it's having the rapport and the engagement of individuals, because if we are the first ones who we are going to be working with a person who has been highly traumatized early on, we might suspect that his or her ability to form healthy relationships or stay with you for a considerably amount of time for treatment to work are a little bit very slim, right? Because, like trust is a big issue, feeling safe is a big issue. And oftentimes, those are sort of the basic elements for you to ensure that people will come back to see you. So, and I think that's one of the pieces that we need to start working, carefully on, not, engaging them where they are at, meeting them at what they are at. If they went to see you, they went to see you for something specific. So, trying to figure out how we can provide that something specific, we can provide some relief to ensure that they will come the next visit and keep on building more momentum for treatment to begin and to do the work that this person needs, right? So it's in small steps. It's very doable. And oftentimes, if you're working with Latinos, the piece that is really important is how you also figure out ways to involving other members of the family, because, oftentimes if you're working with adults, they are there because there is somebody who has sent them, or there are children involved. And, they are there not only because of themselves, but they are there because they also want to help somebody who they love. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chan. Yeah, in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, Wendeling, I'm going to ask if you're there and you can pull up the poll. When we mention it, that would be great.
Yes, it's open. People are starting to answer.
Oh, great.
30% of participation.
Oh, awesome. Great. So we shared some questions around the poll, and some of those questions maybe can inform what we have. Oh, we have a question from Doris. Doris, please go ahead.
Yes.
I just see, because I just already put it also on the chat, that it's very difficult to keep them engaged in therapy, because most of the time most of my clients are Latino, most of them are from Central America, and most of them, what they want when they come to therapy is resources, and they focus so much into resources. And I know they have a lot of trauma, not just the journey to get to US, but also their trauma they have from where they were from. But there's a complex trauma, but they don't really want to work on their trauma. What they really want is resources and stuff. It is so hard to redirect. And I try to like refocus and refer them to resources. But they want me to do the resourcing. So it's so difficult for me to do both things because I cannot do both things and I don't have the resources myself to provide the resources. I refer and sometimes they do follow up and sometimes they really don't and they come back and they want me to do the resourcing and I tell them that I don't have the resources to do it. So it is just very challenging and I can be with somebody for a year and I do very, very tiny bit. I just provide the relationship part. I know I try my best, but I don't really do very much into the trauma that I see. There's a lot. And I do a lot of education. That's most of that what I do. So
That's
it's very
wonderful.
challenging for me to do any really trauma work.
So Doris, thank you so much for your sharing. And I think that what I'm gonna say, it might not sound right, but you're doing more than enough, right? So if they go back for you for a year, that means that they already trust you. That means that they feel safe for you. And those are the bricks to continue doing the work. And you know, oftentimes I think that if any of us, I mean, I can talk for myself. If I when I am triggered or when there is something that's not going right in my life, and you know that will bring me back to early experiences. But all that I want is some sort of relief. Before I move into, you know, finding and identifying my triggers and, you know, what type of trauma is coming up for me, I really want some sort of relief. And this is what these families and these people are looking up to you. They want the relief, and the relief that they are sort of asking you is for resources that can really give them some sort of like, and that in itself, they don't do it with everybody. They do it because you provide something to them that is pretty unique. And, you know, oftentimes as providers, we want to do more and more. But I think that we need to celebrate the small steps because these small steps are super big. And it takes years. I'm in this business for so long, and my goodness, you know, like anybody who will tell you that this is an easy work or that they can do it, that we can do it super fast. I don't really believe that. It takes years, and you know, like the bricks need to keep on building up. So I had actually a wonderful participant in one of my trainings, and when we talk about developmental challenges, we were talking about how in different stages we have like stairs, and the stairs were broken, right? The first ones were broken, and we were saying this is what happens, right? When people experience complex trauma, the foundations are not there, and this participant quickly, I mean super quick, sort of drew the stairs, the same stairs that we actually had in our PowerPoint presentation, but this time he actually drew a bridge. And he said that we were the bridge. So oftentimes when we are working with individuals who do not have a good foundation because of their adverse childhood experiences, because of their complex trauma, you know, oftentimes we are the bridge. And that might be experienced in different ways. It might be that we help them to overcome some trauma itself and process it, or it might be providing resources and letting them know that they can trust people. Or it might be just referring them because obviously I know what you're talking about, Doris, because I wish that I could have a building so I could send them and I could find housing for them or, you know, different things. And I don't. But, you know, the fact that you are listening means the world to them. They might not tell you, but it means a lot. And maybe you are actually, you know, even making a difference because when they go back home, they're not going to mistreat their kids because they are super triggered. They might give them the same smile that you gave them. So little things that are planting seeds that are also as important as other things.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Oh.
Thank you, Dr. Chan.
Sure.
Did I hear someone? I think we have a question on the chat. I want to address that. And first of all, thank you for bringing that topic about trust and building trust, which is sometimes we sometimes oversee that we have built that trust. And for Hispanic and Latino communities, trust can be an essential aspect in an alliance for care. Mariluz Marrero asked, and I'll read this in Spanish and then in English, ¿cuál ha sido su experiencia con personas de edad avanzada y el apoyo ante experiencias traumáticas? What has been your experience with people of advanced stage and supporting in traumatic experiences?
So that's a great question. Another great question. Thank you so much, Mariluz. So one of the things that I think that when I work with older adults is that, they have a life experience, right? Like they do have like years of, experiences. There might have been some traumatic experiences, but they are there with me. So I know that they are survivors, and many of them are actually more than survivors, right? So my experience has been on trying to figure out what has helped them. And they do have resources, otherwise they wouldn't be knocking on your door. And that's where my focus is on, what have they done that for them that have allowed them to make it this far. And if they make that this far as an older adult, I mean, there are many great lessons that we can all learn. And it's a matter of sort of packaging it for them. Because oftentimes what trauma does is it does not help us seeing, our own competence, our own power. It doesn't really help us see the amazing individuals who we all are. So my work then is into packaging it back to them from what they tell me, and to help them as much as possible to get to the core essence of who they are.
Thank you. And as any other questions come in, I'm going to take this opportunity, Gwendolyn, if you could, to allow me to share the screen, and to let everyone know that before we conclude today, to please complete our evaluation. I will share it through the chat, and let's move on to the next question or comment. We have a comment from Christina. Christina, I'll read this for you, but feel free if you wish to come in and ask it directly as well. Many times we do not know how to advocate for ourselves, and many times we have to take people by the hand and take them to where they need to go. Also, in the US, where the Latina population is criminalized and seen under a negative narrative, we think we are not going to be helped. We are made to believe we are a bother. Thank you for that very powerful and precise observation around Latina populations.
Yes, Christina, thank you. This is really a wonderful observation and reflection. And, oftentimes many times what has made me survive and thrive in this country as an immigrant myself has been that, I learned how to knock on doors, and there were some doors that never opened, but, you never give up and you try to keep on knocking on more doors. And, for us who already are here and who made it, it's actually I think that now we have, it's our duty to help other people who are just starting and facing similar challenges that, we have faced at some point in our lives. So that's one piece. And, I'm a firm believer, even though this country offers, different things, all mixed up, but in this country, you also will find places where fit you, where you feel that you might belong. And I think that's if there is one thing that we can show to Latino communities, Latino members or Latine members or any other communities, that, look for a good niche. And you will find it. You will find it. Sometimes it's hard to find, but don't give up because it is there. And And that's what helps. Healthy relationships really help to overcome many of the numerous challenges that a person might face.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm going to pull up now so everyone can see this very quickly. Well, as any other questions come in, I would like to let everyone know that we have different social media platforms where you can follow us and see other events such as this one that could be beneficial for you in terms of engaging, communicating, working through areas of behavioral health with Hispanic Latino populations. And the QR code for the evaluation I shared the link through the chat. Let's see if there's other questions here. I'll read this first in Spanish and then in English. ¿Cómo es el tratamiento para personas con trauma complejo, con abuso de sustancias, especialmente personas latinas que no cuentan con un seguro médico? ¿Dónde referirlos o dónde encontrar ayuda? So, how is treatment for people with complex trauma who use substances, especially Latina people who do not have medical insurance, and how to receive help for them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, obviously, I wish I could have more good answers. But one of the things is that we know that the co-occurring treatment is important, right? So many times, substance abuse in the 70s was completely separated from mental health treatment. And now that they have combined it, I think it makes better sense. Oftentimes, not all the time, but in general terms, substance abuse are connected or correlate positively with trauma and complex trauma, just like you mentioned. So treatment about complex trauma is important to decrease the substance. It's almost what we understand is that it's a coping mechanism, that maladaptive coping mechanism, but at some point it actually helped this person survive, and then they kept on repeating the same thing. And unfortunately, as a result of it, oftentimes what happens is that you experience further trauma, right? Because you take higher risks. But the whole idea of not stigmatizing a person who has an addiction problem, that's one thing. The whole idea of knowing that it's not only one type of treatment that's going to help, it's a multiple sort of things that can help an individual to recover. So it's either, participating in therapy if it is possible, if not AA or NA meetings, oftentimes finding, we talk about finding niches, and, many times it's finding different communities with healthy sort of individuals who can really be of the support for the person. And it takes more than a village to really help individuals. It doesn't really matter what people say, and just building more communities, and knowing that, and keeping the faith and the hope that things will get better. And addictions can also, there are treatments. And now there is a lot of self-help that I know is not the same of, going to physical treatments or whatever, but, now you can find experts in the field talking about it and giving you many good tips on YouTube, on, all these different sort of platforms. And that's also another thing, that if you know somebody who is struggling, you can maybe listen to a good tape or a good session with them. You can take them to you can attend AA or NA meetings with them, things like that, just to build communities and to let them know that they're not alone. That's also important.
Thank you. That's very, very to the point of, and the spirit of what we've, I think, been discussing today in terms of safety, not only within ourselves, within our communities, and what that means for trauma-informed care. I think we'll have enough time for one more question, and I'll read that quickly, and I'll let everyone know that I shared the presentation through the chat. that's in a PDF format, so you can download for your use. Please be mindful always to reference the authors. We always appreciate that. Nancy Juarez asks, how effective is EMDR for complex trauma?
Okay, great question. I would say that for some people it's super effective, and for some people not too effective. But I think that it is research shows that it can be very effective, and it depends. It depends on also the individual. I believe that this is like anything in life. I think that if you feel comfortable, if you trust, if you feel safe, and if you sort of notice some difference, I think go for it. If not, this is what I tell my clients. Sometimes I might not be a good match, maybe not because of the treatment that I'm providing or my personality or whatever, but never give up in therapy. We can really figure out ways, and there are multiple treatment modalities that can really work for you. But we need to keep on trying, and we need to keep on, understanding and being super conscious of what works for us.
Thank you. It's been really, we've been delighted to have you, Dr. Chan. We've been also very, very happy to have all the providers who joined today, to have the chance to put in their feedback, their questions, and be part of this experience of sharing knowledge and sharing understanding around trauma and best practices with Hispanic Latinos. So thank you, everyone. That's going to be all for today, but we'll be here again for other upcoming events. So feel free to follow us, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Thank you.